A black luxury car rolled to a slow stop before the broken house, its polished body completely out of place against the dry land and cracked earth. As the tires settled, dust rose gently into the air, swirling as if the ground itself remembered the footsteps that once ran barefoot here. For a moment, everything stood still. The car, the field, the silence, like time had paused to watch who had returned. The man stepped out, adjusting the sharp blue suit that fit him perfectly, tailored to success, wealth, and power. But his eyes betrayed him. They were not the eyes of a man who had conquered the world. They were heavy, carrying the weight of years that money could never erase. This was the place he had escaped from. Years ago, he had run from hunger that twisted his stomach into knots, from shame that followed him like a shadow, from nights when rain leaked through a broken roof and fell onto his face as he tried to sleep. He had promised himself he would never return. And yet here he stood, a billionaire now, not to remember but to erase this house from existence forever. The walls were cracked, wood eaten by time and neglect. The roof sagged as if it had given up the fight long ago. Still, memories clung to every stone like ghosts that refused to leave. Laughter, crying, whispered prayers in the dark. They all lived here still. He took a step forward. Something tightened in his chest. It felt as if the air itself did not want him there. Behind him, the demolition team waited in silence. The bulldozer stood ready, its metal body unmoving, its teeth aimed at the house like a predator waiting for permission to strike. One command, and the past would collapse into dust and noise. But before he could speak, the door creaked open. The sound sliced through time like an old wound being torn open again. A woman stood in the doorway, holding a child against her chest. Two other children stood close to her, one clutching her dress, the other standing just slightly forward, watching quietly. Their clothes were worn, their faces tired, but there was no fear in their eyes. Only exhaustion, only survival. This was not an empty ruin anymore. It was someone's shelter, someone's last protection against a world that had already taken too much. The billionaire froze. His breath slowed, shallow and unsteady, because the smallest boy standing there looked exactly like he once did. The same thin frame, the same cautious stillness, the same eyes that had learned far too early how to read danger in silence. Suddenly, tearing down the house felt less like construction and more like destroying his own story. The wind passed through the dry field, whispering through dead grass, but no one spoke. Even nature seemed to wait, holding its breath to see what he would do next. The woman tightened her hold on the baby, instinctively pulling the child closer. Her eyes stayed on him, steady, strong. She was not begging, she was not pleading, she was ready to protect her children from anything. Behind her, the little girl clutched the fabric of her dress with both hands. The older boy stood still, not blinking, not moving, watching the rich man with a quiet intensity that felt heavier than anger. He had faced threats in boardrooms, power plays, rivals who smiled while plotting his downfall. None of that frightened him anymore. But this quiet courage, this silence, pressed against his chest in a way he had never felt before. His hand, the same one that signed million-dollar deals without hesitation, now felt weak as it hung by his side. Memories rushed back. His mother standing in doorways just like this one, shielding him from landlords, from cold nights, from voices that told them they did not belong. Back then, strangers had looked at them the same way he was looking at this family now. The house smelled of dust and survival, of people who did not live here by choice, but by necessity alone. He glanced back at the bulldozer. Its engine was silent, unaware that it was moments away from crushing something far more fragile than wood and stone. For the first time in years, success felt small, like paper money held up against something that actually mattered. The smallest child shifted slightly in the woman's arms, then reached out a tiny hand toward him. Not asking for help, not begging, just curious. That single movement cracked something inside him. The child's hand trembled in the air, reaching toward a future it did not yet understand. The billionaire stared at it, seeing not dirt or poverty, but himself, the boy he had been, the boy who once waited for someone, anyone, to stop and care. His throat tightened. The woman adjusted her stance, ready to close the door if needed, but she never lowered her gaze. There was no anger there, only the strength of someone who fought life every single day and kept standing. The little girl glanced at the shiny black car, its perfect surface reflecting sunlight, then back at the broken walls behind her. That look cut deeper than words ever could. A quiet voice rose behind him. "Sir, should we begin?" The engine rumbled low, like a countdown. The sound pushed him to choose between the man he had become and the boy he had buried. His shoes felt heavy against the dirt road, the same ground where he once ran barefoot, skin burning under the sun. Success had carried him far, but somehow it had brought him right back to the door he never healed from. And as the child's hand slowly lowered, not in rejection, but in quiet acceptance, a voice whispered inside him, "Don't repeat what the world did to you." His chest rose slowly, like a man learning how to breathe again after years of running from something buried deep inside him. Behind him, the machines growled to life, engines vibrating, metal awakening. But before the sound could fully take shape, he raised his hand. "Stop." The word was quiet, yet it sliced through the noise with authority. The engines fell silent again, dust drifting lazily between him and the doorway, forming a thin line between two worlds that had never been meant to meet. The workers exchanged confused glances. They had never seen him hesitate before, never seen doubt touch his command. He was known for decisions made fast and without emotion. But now he stood still, staring at a house that looked ready to collapse under its own memories. His eyes traced the cracked walls, the sagging roof, the broken windows patched with scraps of wood and plastic. Nights returned to him, counting stars through holes in a ceiling just like this, rain dripping onto his face while he pretended not to feel cold. He remembered how his mother used her own body as a shield, turning sideways to block the rain, choosing discomfort so he could sleep. That memory struck him hard, because the woman before him stood the same way. Her body was angled protectively, one shoulder slightly forward, her arms tight around the baby, as if her own strength alone could keep the world outside from hurting them. There was no complaint in her posture, only instinct, only love. Money had built towers in his name, glass buildings that reached toward the sky. But none of them had ever protected someone the way she was doing right now. He stepped closer. The dry soil shifted beneath his shoes, sinking slightly with each step. It felt wrong to approach as an owner. He no longer felt like one. He felt like a lost son returning to a place that had never truly left him. The little girl didn't move. She only watched him, eyes too old for her age, eyes that had already learned disappointment. He knew that look. He had worn it himself once. The look of a child who learns early that hope must be guarded carefully because it leaves without warning. In the silence, a truth formed clearly in his mind. Demolition was easy. Rebuilding a soul was the harder work, and most people failed at it. For the first time since power had wrapped itself around his life, he felt small, not weak, small in front of something honest and unavoidable. Slowly, he reached up and removed his sunglasses. The glass came away, and sunlight touched his eyes. But the deeper burn came from guilt. Guilt he had buried under years of success deals, and pride. He had believed power meant never looking back, never facing the frightened version of himself he had escaped. Yet here stood a family living the same chapter he had torn out of his past, still trapped inside its hard pages. The smallest boy stepped forward again, just one step. Tiny fingers curled, uncertain but brave. That movement shook him more than market crashes or business failures ever had. Innocence carried a courage that ambition never could. At that age, he too had waited for a miracle, for one strong hand to change his direction. No one came, and the absence of that moment had shaped his entire life. The woman shifted the baby higher on her hip. Her arms trembled slightly from exhaustion, but her spine remained straight. Dignity stood tall in her, unbroken by hunger or fear. In her, he saw his mother again, the same fire, the same refusal to surrender, the same quiet strength that said, "We may have nothing, but we still stand." Behind him, engines idled softly. Workers whispered. Their sounds faded into something distant and unimportant, because the real choice was no longer behind him. It stood right here. Repeat the world's coldness, or become the help he once needed. His lips parted, but no words came. His voice felt fragile, as if speaking too soon might shatter the moment. The boy slowly lowered his hand, not in rejection, in acceptance, like someone already familiar with hope leaving. That quiet surrender hurt more than tears ever could. It spoke of a life that had already learned how to let go without making noise. He took another step forward. His heartbeat sounded louder than the machines waiting for his command. Each step felt like walking backward through time, into wounds he had sworn never to touch again. The girl shifted slightly behind her mother, fingers tightening around the fabric of her dress. Her eyes never left his face, measuring him, searching for danger or kindness. He wondered when children learned to read adults like that, when innocence learned caution. Finally, the woman spoke. Her voice was calm, not weak, not pleading. It carried the steady strength of someone who had nothing left to hide. "We will leave if you ask," she said softly. "We just needed a roof for a little while, to survive." There was no blame in her words, no accusation, just truth. And that honesty struck harder than anger ever could. He looked at the broken roof, then at the baby resting against her chest, unaware of how close their world had come to collapsing. A life balanced on a decision that would take only seconds, yet carry weight far heavier than any contract he had ever signed. The workers shifted their feet behind him, confused by his silence. They didn't understand that time had stopped here, that power meant nothing in front of a moment like this. Cold nights returned to him, hunger, his mother whispering hope into darkness when there was none. Now hope stood before him again, not as a dream, as 3 children waiting without asking. His heart pounded, because he knew some moments decide who a person becomes for the rest of their life. And this moment asked him one question only: will you protect them, or protect your comfort again? The question echoed inside him long after the woman's voice faded. It settled deep in his chest, heavy and unmoving, like a stone dropped into still water. For years, he had believed comfort was the reward for survival, that escaping poverty gave him the right to never look back. Yet now, standing on the same dirt that once burned his bare feet, comfort felt like betrayal. He swallowed hard. His eyes moved slowly from one child to the next. The boy's shirt was torn at the shoulder, threads hanging loose, yet he stood straight, chin lifted just slightly. Pride held him upright, pride stronger than the poverty clinging to his clothes. The billionaire recognized it instantly. That same stubborn strength had once kept him alive when the world offered nothing else. The girl pressed her fingers against the doorframe, gripping the splintered wood as if it were the last solid thing in her life. He remembered doing the same during storms, pretending walls were stronger than fear, believing that if he held on tightly enough, nothing bad could reach him. The woman's arms trembled again, the weight of the baby never shifting to ease her strain. She carried the burden fully, without complaint. Love like that had once been the only shield protecting his childhood. Behind him, a worker checked his watch. The sound of metal clicking softly felt wrong here, like an intrusion. Time mattered everywhere else in his life. Meetings, deadlines, profits. But here, time waited for his heart to decide. Money could rebuild houses in days, but moments like this, they never returned. He realized then that he wasn't standing before strangers. He was standing before a mirror, and for the first time in years, his eyes burned with tears. Not from weakness, from truth finally breaking through layers of armor he had spent a lifetime forging. He took one more step forward. The woman did not retreat. That alone told him everything. "I won't make you leave," he said at last. His voice sounded unfamiliar to his own ears, softer, steadier, stripped of command. The words hung in the air, fragile but real. The woman's grip on the baby tightened, just for a second, as if she needed proof she had heard correctly. The boy's eyes widened slightly. The girl loosened her hold on the doorframe, though she didn't let go completely. He turned his head slightly and raised his voice, not loudly, but clearly enough for everyone behind him to hear. "There will be no demolition today." Silence followed, then confusion. A worker stepped forward, uncertain. "Sir, the project is cancelled," he said without anger, without explanation. "Leave the machines. We're done here." No one argued. They had never heard that tone from him before. Not the voice of a billionaire issuing orders, but of a man who had already decided something deeper than business. As the workers slowly backed away, engines shutting down, one by one, the field grew quiet again. Dust settled. The thin line between worlds began to fade. He turned back to the family. "I lived here once," he said quietly. The words felt dangerous, like exposing a wound to open air. But he didn't stop. "Not this exact house, but one just like it. I know what it means to need a roof, even if it's broken." The woman studied his face carefully now, not with fear, with understanding. "You don't owe us anything," she said gently. He shook his head. "This isn't about owing. It was about remembering." He looked at the house again, the cracks, the rot, the exhaustion etched into its bones. "This place shouldn't be torn down," he continued. "It should be rebuilt." The boy took a step closer, hope flickering cautiously in his eyes. The girl's shoulders relaxed just a little. "I can fix the roof," he said. "The walls, the water, the electricity, not as charity, as a promise." "A promise?" the woman asked. "To the child I was," he replied, "and to the one standing in front of me now." The baby made a soft sound, shifting against her chest. Life, unaware, continued. Tears finally slipped down his face, unchecked. He did not wipe them away. For a long time, he said, voice thick, "I believed becoming powerful meant never looking back. But all it did was delay this moment." He met her eyes. "You can stay, as long as you need. And when you're ready, I'll help you find something better. Not because you're weak, but because everyone deserves more than survival." The woman closed her eyes for a brief moment. When she opened them again, there were tears there too, quiet ones. "Thank you," she said. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. The children moved closer to her, instinctively sensing safety where there had been none before. The boy looked up at him. "You won't change your mind?" he asked. He knelt down then, lowering himself until they were eye to eye. The ground pressed against his expensive trousers, dust clinging to the fabric. He didn't care. "No," he said softly. "Some decisions don't change." The boy nodded slowly, as if committing the moment to memory. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the field, the billionaire stood again, lighter than he had in years. The house still stood broken, but it no longer felt abandoned. He walked back toward his car, not to leave, but to call his team. Plans formed quickly now, not of destruction, but of repair, of giving instead of taking. Before getting inside, he looked back once more. The woman stood in the doorway, children gathered around her, watching him, not with fear, with trust. And in that quiet exchange, he understood something he had spent a lifetime chasing without success. Real wealth wasn't built in boardrooms. It was built in moments where a person chose compassion over comfort, and finally broke the cycle the world had once placed around their own heart. True success is not measured by how far you escape your past, but by whether you return with compassion for those still trapped in it. Money can erase places, but it cannot erase pain. Only kindness can break the cycle the world repeats on the poor, the forgotten, and the silent. The moment we choose to protect someone instead of protecting our comfort, we stop becoming a product of the world's cruelty and start becoming the change we once prayed for. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Like this video to support stories that remind us what humanity looks like. Subscribe for more powerful stories where one decision changes a lifetime. Share this with someone who believes success means never looking back, because somewhere right now, someone is standing at a broken door, waiting for a heart brave enough to choose kindness.